from the business community to this event. We have more than 200 people actually who registered and would like to hear the presentations. So we're just waiting a little. We're going to give a few more minutes for the critical mass to gather, and we will start our webinar shortly. So once again, thank you so much for the opportunities. My name is Elena Son, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Uzbekistan Chamber of Commerce, US Kyrgyzstan Business Council, US Tajikistan Business Council, and US Afghanistan Business Initiative. It is a great pleasure for me today to introduce a great panel, great moderator, and the great speakers who are going to open today's webinar on public-private partnership opportunities in Central Asia. This event was actually driven by our members who have expressed a strong interest in learning more about opportunities provided by the Asian Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, USAID, as well as World Bank, about all these opportunities and how American companies, as well as Central Asian companies that have partnerships with our members, can operate and can explore the opportunities provided by the international financial institutions. I'll be very brief because we have a great wonderful panel, and before I begin and introduce our member, Medtronic, Mark Holliday, who is a PPP Global Director. Medtronic is a member of the American Uzbekistan Chamber of Commerce and has been active in Central Asia for a long time. But before I pass the floor to Mark, I'd like to recognize the audience. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you so much for being with us through all these days since the start of the pandemic. I have to say that prior to the pandemic, we've been using Zoom since 2016. Unfortunately, when the pandemic started, we had to switch our format to online. And the silver lining here is that in the past, most of our events were for those who resided in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And now all of a sudden, our outreach has expanded significantly. I now see panelists and participants who joined us from different parts of the world. And despite the time difference and despite your commitments and obligations, we're really grateful for taking the time early in the morning and late in the evening to be with us and to continue to educate business audience about what your institutions do and how the private sector can collaborate with international financial institutions. Special thanks to Dale Henry, who's based in Uzbekistan, who's been there since early 90s. And he called me the other day and to express his support for our programs and how important these programs are to American companies that are based in Central Asia. So without further ado, let me provide floor to Mark Holliday just to welcome all the participants and the speakers on behalf of our chamber. Again, Mark Holliday of Medtronic, PPP Global Director. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, Medtronic is a very active member of the American Uzbekistan Chamber of Commerce. I know several of the panel members as well individually, and I can sort of recommend that you listen very carefully to what they have to say, as I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting session today. Just a few words of those who don't know us. Medtronic is the world's largest medical device manufacturer. We invented the pacemaker, and we're a top 5 ventilator manufacturer, which is perhaps a bit more relevant at the moment. But other than that, we're also a mission-directed company. The 3 key elements of our mission is to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. And to deliver on this means working in partnership. And that's why we're here supporting this and participating in this conference, because it involves partnership with the country, partnership with the multilateral organizations, and partnership with other private sector operators. And the widest participation possible by everyone. So I'd like you, while on this call, to leave you with one thought. Much of this call will inevitably focus on infrastructure. And that's a very important part of public-private partnerships. But success is measured by outcomes. And especially in healthcare, a hospital without any equipment or services is just a concrete box. So if I may, as the discussion goes on, plant the seed that we all must partner together and focus on successful outcomes. That's the real win-win of public-private partnerships. And in the spirit of keeping things short, I will stop there and just say a final welcome to everybody, and thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your membership and for your warm welcome and for emphasizing the need and the importance of PPP in developing infrastructure in Central Asia. And of course, healthcare, I mean, with the pandemic, it just became so obvious to us that we need to put more resources, more knowledge and more partnerships into this very important area. So thank you so much again for being with us today. And we look forward to your questions once the panelists present their views on the opportunities. Next, I would like to introduce the person someone who has been a great friend of AUCC. I started with American Uzbekistan Chamber of Commerce in 2011, and Danica Starks, who is now Senior U.S. Commercial Liaison to the World Bank, Head of Multilateral Development Bank Group at the Department of Commerce, was actually the first one that I met and started talking about Central Asia. So if Danica has a very impressive bio, and one of the slides actually includes her bio. But I would go a little bit further, and I would say that if there is someone who knows more about Central Asia in the United States, it's Danica. And basically, we call her the Queen of Central Asia, Queen of Eurasia space. And we are so delighted that her portfolio has now expanded from being a policy director at the Department of Commerce to now heading and leading the multilateral cooperation between the United States and international financial institutions. So Danica is if you'd like to learn more about just the region, about the opportunities, about the challenges as well of how to do business there, Danica is your go-to person. And without further ado, Danica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yelena. That was a wonderful introduction, and thank you for all of the years of working together. We have done many things across the region. I apologize for the mass things going on in the house, that it's a pandemic. So unfortunately, sometimes the pandemic comes home to us and it's not convenient. Thank you again. Again, I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce. I've been there for over 20 years, and we are delighted to be a part of this program. I am the Senior Commercial Liaison to the World Bank. Many people don't know that the Commerce Department does have liaisons at all of the multilateral development banks to which the U.S. has an executive directorship. So while I'm at the World Bank, my colleague Mark O'Grady is at the Asian Development Bank, and my colleague Janelle Santerre-Wyack is at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And then Miss Barbara White, also located at Commerce headquarters, also supports me at the World Bank. We are a team helping U.S. companies and the Inter-American Development Bank. And we also have a liaison office at the African Development Bank. So I will physically be sitting in the World Bank when we get back to work. But right now, sitting in the U.S. Executive Director's office as an advisor. I'm also responsible, Barbara and I, for helping U.S. companies to access the services of the World Bank, to get opportunities in procurement, whether it's bank-funded projects, the IFC, or directly corporate with World Bank. We would be happy to meet with you to understand your business needs, to understand your focus, and we can do so at all the multilateral development banks. Central Asia is an area of great opportunity, but most of the opportunities will need public-private partnerships, and the multilateral development banks will play a key role in our ability to deliver. The people of Central Asia deserve economic prosperity and opportunity, and I believe that the multilateral development banks play a large role in doing that. And as Mark mentioned, it's not just infrastructure, but infrastructure writ large when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to energy, transportation, agriculture. There are many opportunities, but it can be difficult. And so for those companies that need help in understanding how to navigate the banks, making introductions, we are here for you. In addition to myself and the staff at the multilateral development banks, the Commerce Department has an office in Central Asia in Almaty with a senior commercial officer. And we have partnership posts through our office in Turkey with Uzbekistan, with Turkmenistan. And we can also provide assistance through our State Department colleagues in the Kyrgyz Republic and Tajikistan. Also in Washington, D.C., we have the Office of Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, and Garrett Mitchell is our Central Asia desk officer, backed up by Tanner Johnson and Boris Chumon. So lots of resources at the U.S. Department of Commerce to help companies. So if you find opportunities or are interested in something that you hear about today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Yelena can help you provide our contact information. And again, welcome. I think this is going to be an excellent webinar. I'll keep it short because I know we have some wonderful panelists. Yelena, thank you again for the opportunity, and wonderful that we still get to work together. Take care and have a great day.
Sure. Thank you so much, Danica. And again, thank you so much for being a great friend and a great resource to American companies. And we attribute the success of American companies actually to your hard work and to your dedication and commitment to actually helping them navigate through different challenges of doing business in this part of the world. I would like to now move to and introduce our panel. That will be moderated by Christopher Weaver, Chief Executive of Macro Advisory Limited. Macro Advisory Limited is also a member of AUCC. And again, all the impressive bios are there, part of the slides. They've been included also in the invitation. But for those of you who are looking for either a speaker, expert, or a moderator, actually Chris Weaver is the person to go to. Macro Advisory is a boutique firm that provides advisory services to multinationals as well as large American companies on how to read, how to understand the investment climate, how to understand the business climate of Central Asia, as well as Russia and Ukraine and many other countries in the CIS space. Chris is a sought after speaker. He has a wealth of knowledge. We hosted actually Chris last year for the conversation on his understanding of the Russian politics and their influence on the Central Asian relations with China, Russia, and the United States. So once again, we are delighted to have Chris here to moderate the panel. And the panel consists of wonderful, hardworking professionals who are the experts in the PPP sector. I'd like to acknowledge each one of them and thank them on behalf of all our members for being here with us. And it's Takeo Koike, Director, Advisory Division 1, Office of Public-Private Partnership at the Asian Development Bank, Shantanu Chakraborty, Director, Infrastructure Division, South Asia, Central Asia, and West Asia, Private Sector Operations Department at the Asian Development Bank, Matthew Jordan Tang, Director, Sustainable Infrastructure Policy and Project Preparation at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Ryder Rogers, Director, Economic Development Office, Central Asia, USAID, and Anand Kumar Srivastava, Coordinator for Regional Integration Projects and Senior Governor Specialist Procurement, Africa Regions at the World Bank. Actually, all our panelists are located in different parts of the world. Takeo is in Japan, Shantanu is in Manila, Matthew is in Germany, Ryder is in Kazakhstan, and Anand is in London. And so we appreciate, again, the time difference and the opportunity to speak with you and to listen. And without further ado, let me introduce Chris. And Chris, please, the panel is yours, and we look forward to a wonderful discussion. And to the participants, please make sure that if you have any questions, please make sure to either post them on the chat or Q&A. And if you have any sensitive questions and do not want to identify your company name or your personal name, you can send an email to info@acconline.com. I'm going to post it on the chat, and please feel free to ask questions and we will answer all questions. Again, this webinar is for you and to address all the issues and questions that you may have. Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elena, and good day to everybody. Greetings from Moscow. Actually, I have a very easy job today. Elena's already run through kind of all of the who the panelists are and their titles, and it really is just for me to run the order. And again, just to remind you, as Elena said, if you've got questions, please do post them in the chat, and then we will take questions after all of the participants have spoken. We have 5 excellent presenters today, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to what everybody has to say. So first up, we're going to ask Mr. Takeo Koike, Director of the Office of Public and Private Partnership at ADB. He's had that role for since 2014, but has 25 years experience in private sector infrastructure finance and PPP across Asia and the Pacific. And his impressive bio, of course, is in the advertisement announcement. So Takeo, let me pass the floor to you and ask you to start your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And then good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Takeo from ADB, Office of Public-Private Partnership. Today, I'm actually participating in this event with my colleague, Mr. Shantanu Chakraborty, and then he's going to actually present after me. But just largely speaking, I come from the advisory operations of ADB. So I work on upstream in relation to project preparation, as well as also capacity building and some support to the policy side. Shantanu comes from the non-sovereign financing side. So perhaps, by two of us, we can cover a major part of the ADB's PPP intervention in the region. And then again, I want to thank American Chamber of Commerce in the region for inviting us to this event. And then by introducing our recent operations, I hope we can indicate some of the potential business opportunities for American companies. With this introduction, please let me share my screen with you, and then just see, bear with me for a few seconds. I hope you can see the slides. So let me start. For ADB, PPP is actually a quite good example of bringing in different skill sets and then products from different parts of the bank, and then we call it one ADB approach. So as this slide shows, we have regional department which provides sovereign financing through the government, and then we have non-sovereign team, private sector operations department, who can also finance PPP projects directly without government guarantee. And then our function is, as just mentioned, to provide transaction advisory services to prepare bankable transactions and then deliver to the market. And this is actually ADB's overall PPP framework. And then, as you see, on the left-hand side, we looked at a couple of policy level interventions, including capacity building, and then also creating market and then creating enabling environment. And then on the right-hand side, we have more project-specific interventions in relation to project development and then preparations, where our office is actually engaging. And then on the right-hand side, that's a financing. I just mentioned Shantanu's team is working on non-sovereign financing, but also increasingly in the PPP space, we have sovereign financing opportunities, basically, which can support the government to provide certain necessary financial support to those projects. So by this framework, we think ADB has a kind of unique advantage to provide holistic solutions to promote PPP program in those regions, in those countries. So I just picked up several projects in those 4 countries, which are of your interest, I believe. Right now, we are quite busy in Uzbekistan. We started a few years ago after the new administration came on board. And then we actually cover quite, a wide variety of activities, and then providing very comprehensive support to the government, starting from actually capacity building to the PPP development authority in the Ministry of Finance. But then at the project level, right now we are working on 5 different projects, from energy to urban, and then even social sector. Amongst those, right now, we are at the relatively advanced stage of the solar power project, Sherabad Solar, which is the second bottom. And then also we are advancing work on the wastewater treatment plant in Namangan. And then those are relatively at the advanced stage. And then in addition, we are supporting the Tashkent municipality on this district heating project. And then also we are supporting public schools in Tashkent region. So those are the types of projects which we expect in the coming years. And then looking at Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, those are the countries where we don't really have too many interventions for now, but because of the track records as well as also the environment in the country. But we are working on few things in collaboration with our sovereign team, so that we can actually provide a joint support to some of their PPP efforts. For instance, in Tajikistan, they are now trying to introduce a management contractor in the power distribution sector, And then we are now providing support to the government to monitor their performance under the contract. And then in Afghanistan, again, the sovereign sovereign financing team is working on a water resource project at the Dala Dam. And then in conjunction with that, we are now helping the government to consider and explore installing a hydropower generation capacity as a kind of PPP. It's still early stage, but we are now investigating a PPP potential on those transactions. I actually want to show a little bit more details, but maybe I don't really have too much time to get into, but just a quick scan of those projects. This is a wastewater treatment plant in Namangan, which I just mentioned earlier. This project is now under RFQ stage, and then shortlist will be prepared fairly soon. And then based on that, we are moving on to RFP stage and then tender. So we hope that the result will come hopefully by next year. This one is a kind of solar program which we are now embarking on. And then the first phase is a Sherabat solar, which is almost like a 200 megawatt IPP in the southern part of the Uzbekistan. We actually provide a joint kind of support with our sovereign team, combining their feasibility study and then also solar radiation study, as well as also a credit enhancement product which can actually guarantee off-takers payment risk under the PPA. So again, this one is already at the tendering stage, and then bid is due on, I think, 12th of April, a few weeks down the line. And then after that, we'll support the government for evaluation of those bids, and then hopefully it could be closed sometime later this year. For information, we are also about to launch the second phase right next to this site, and then also the third one may be considered sometime a little later, so that we can actually support total 1 gigawatt of solar capacity. Well, this one is a school in Tashkent. This is relatively early stage, and then we are still working on the pre-feasibility study. Subject to, I think, a presidential decree to be issued by the Uzbekistan government, we are ready to move on to the next phase for project concept. This is not a part of those, 4 countries, but just in the region, we have a couple of probably related PPP support. So this is one of them. We are working in Kazakhstan. It was just mentioned earlier that healthcare sector could be also a potential, but we are indeed working on those hospital projects in the region, including this one. This is a kind of a university hospital in Karaganda, and then we have done most of the preparatory work, and then now moving towards the RFQ stage. And then this is the last one. It's a student accommodation in Azerbaijan. I mean, recently, given the situation in the region, we haven't really made too much progress. But this, if it happens, this could be the first kind of attempt in the country to work on PPPs in this education sector. And then it could be replicable probably in the country as well as also some other places. And then this is still an early stage. We are still working on the pre-feasibility study, but those are the kind of probably examples about where we are actually active in the region, and then could probably indicate some of the potential opportunities for American companies. Well, then thank you very much indeed for giving me this opportunity today. So let me just stop here, and then I just give it back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Takeo. And to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box and we'll deal with them later. But now we'll move on to Takeo's colleague, Shanatu Chakrabarti. He's the Director of the Infrastructure Division for South Asia, Central Asia and West Asia of the Private Sector Operations Department of the ADB. And he's been there for over 15 years. So again, his details of his and everybody else's bios are in the notice of this meeting that you will all have received. So let me pass it on to you, Shanatu, and look forward to listening to your presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Let me try to, okay, so basically, I think Takeo has already introduced me. So I am heading up infrastructure financing part, which is, as Takeo mentioned in his presentation, the pillar 4 of our PPP, framework, which is the downstream part, which is actually financing of PPP projects. So let me just try to share my screen as well. So yeah, so I'll basically kind of focus my presentation on why ADB is really supporting private sector and PPP in the region, which is at the crux of the discussions we're having, and then I'll also cover a couple of kind of projects and operations we have in the 4 countries of interest here. So basically. So as Takeo mentioned, so ADB, for some of you who may not be aware, I mean, the private sector does account for a significant part of ADB's operations, roughly in the range of 15 to 20% in any given year, while the bulk of ADB's operations is really on the sovereign side, to lend to governments. We do have a very robust private sector and a growing private sector operation in the region. And my department and my team is really responsible for all private sector financing and investments, what we call non-sovereign, which is basically without any government guarantee of any nature. The emphasis of our operation obviously is commercially viable transactions, so that is the root of our operations. So without that, as you know, there can be no private sector. And the other key thing that we really kind of focus on is kind of mobilizing third-party capital, because ADB's resources are limited. So it's ingrained in our strategy to really kind of mobilize as much of other parties' capitals to support our operations as well. So why do we work with the private sector? Very basic question. I don't think the audience here needs to really be baptized on this topic, but let me go through. So ADB has really determined that to achieve the SDGs, I mean, we really need to focus on the private sector because it is the one that is crucial in mobilizing resources, creating jobs, and supporting growth in the region. I mean, studies have shown that 90% of all jobs in developing countries are from the private sector. The gap is huge. The infrastructure gap is huge in the region, and clearly the public sector, especially with the fiscal headroom that most of the countries in the region are currently facing, is not capable of meeting the gap, and it's imperative for the private sector through the PPP modality or anything else of that nature to really come in to fill in the market gap, and almost all the DFIs are really increasing that emphasis on private sector financing. So how can the ADB assist the private sector? So we basically, as Takeo mentioned, we play a key role through our sovereign operations, through our PPP advisory, and also through my shop's kind of initiatives to improve the business environment. We do a lot of work in the upstream side, in the policy side, through our sovereign interventions, through the specific transaction advisory interventions that Takeo referred to kind of improve the overall business environment, to increase the number of bankable projects, which is obviously a very clear problem in the region that we're discussing today. Central Asia has historically had a dearth of bankable projects, and so it's in our mandate, we believe, to really work towards enhancing the pool of bankable projects. We tend to create markets. That's our objectives. May not be in the infrastructure space, but we are very active in healthcare and education, in the financial institution space, in trade finance, for instance, where one of our objectives is clearly to create markets, and as I say, to crowd in private financing, either by way of debt or equity. We do leverage a lot on the relationship that we have with the governments, given that we have a seat at the policy table in most of the countries that we're discussing here, given our significant presence on the sovereign side, and we do try to leverage that as much as possible to enhance, to kind of to advance our agenda to bring in the private sector. We work a lot with the financial intermediaries in the region. We have a robust knowledge product activity there, and also we have the capacity to mobilize even greater amounts by by leveraging our non-sovereign window and also our sovereign operations. So this is just a survey essentially in a nutshell as to why the private sector clients like to work with DFIs. And as you can see, I mean right at the top is of course the value that we bring to the table on the ENS side. I mean clearly we follow the best practice in ENS in terms of imparting knowledge, in terms of relationships, and in terms of mobilizing capital for additional resources. So commercial capital gets a lot of kind of comfort when multilaterals are in transactions, and so those are our top four or five main reasons why the private sector clients in frontier countries tend to gravitate towards working with us in the region. Moving on, so at the core of so ADB came out with its strategy 2030 in 2018, and that really is a roadmap for our operations up to 2030 for the next 12 years since 2018. At the heart of it is the private sector. I mean, the private sector in ADB's operations has never assumed that much of a space of prominence in any of its strategies. So the biggest metric, I mean, one of the biggest kind of quantitative metrics of the strategy is that by 2024, 1/3 of ADB operations by number of deals will have to be from the private sector. So that's a significant kind of a target that ADB has set for itself in its strategy. And also the other very important kind of quantitative target that we've set for ourselves is essentially, I mean, in the one that relates to kind of mobilizing resources from other parties. So for every $1 that ADB deploys from its private sector window, we are expected to mobilize $2.5 from other parties. So clearly the emphasis here is not to use our own balance sheet, but to leverage our expertise and our presence in country to really crowd in other parties, since our balance sheet is not sufficient to really meet the gap that exists in this space. So coming to the products that we offer from our private sector side, so we do have a very wide array of products that we offer to support infrastructure projects, including of course PPP driven projects. Debt, we have the capacity to provide debt up to $500 million and of course very long tenor up to 15 years. I mean we've even done 20 years of debt in the past in the region. We also take on equity stakes in projects up to $100 million. Up to a maximum limit of 25% of the equity. We have a wide array of guarantee products that we can offer, to mitigate various forms of political risk and also credit risk, and we have used those successfully in the region as well. We also have access to a lot of donor funding, who have kind of entrusted ADB with the job of kind of managing trust funds on their behalf. And those are concessional financing that we also have used a lot in the region to kind of support marginally bankable projects in the region. And of course, last but not the least, we do provide technical assistances on an as-needed basis to kind of improve the robustness and the level of preparedness of projects. Eligible transactions, of course, they have to be in ADB's member countries and in our target sectors. They have to be developmentally sound and also commercially sound. So clearly, we put a lot of focus on the development storyline that underpins the project. The financing should have no direct guarantee by the government. So basically, should really comply with all our safeguards, requirements, and also for equity investment, we also need a board seat for ADB and a clear exit strategy. So essentially, I mean, we focus on what additionality can we bring to projects, which are basically financial and non-financial. So financial additionalities would include things such as long tenor that we can provide to projects, which is typically not available in the commercial market. Fixed rate kind of loans, which are also typically not available for long tenors in the markets that we operate in. So those are clearly financial additionalities that we think we bring value in. And the non-financial additionalities are basically the stamp of approval, the halo effect that is associated with an ADB participation in a transaction, our role as a neutral broker vis-a-vis the government, and also other elements such as I mentioned, ensuring a very high standard of ENS in our project. And also of late, there's been a lot of focus on gender in all our projects. And we do strive to instill as much of gender positive attributes to all our projects. So those are some of the non-financial additionalities that we seek to impart in the projects that we support. This is just a nutshell of the types of transactions that we have done. It's of course a bit of a busy slide, so I'll not go into very much detail, but as you can see, we are very active in the Central Asia region. The 4 countries that are under discussion here, I mean, I'll go into another, the next slide can talk about that. But in 2020, we've been very active in Armenia, we've been active in Georgia, Afghanistan, we did 1 transaction, Uzbekistan, and of course, in the region across, we have very, very strong presence in larger markets such as India, China, Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. So I just want to emphasize again that at the root of our interventions is really the development impact of the private sector operations. So we do have a very robust methodology for kind of calculating what exactly has been the development impact of our operations. So there are key metrics that are associated with all our projects, which we track very closely. And on the right side of the screen, as you will see, some of those are things like employment generation, CO2 emissions reduced, and these are some of the kind of illustrative KPIs in addition to the financial KPIs that we track very closely in all our transactions. So for instance, basically the PSOD's active portfolio right now has generated about 320,000 jobs in the couple of years. So we do track this, and this is a very important set of information that we provide to our stakeholders and shareholders, because they really are keen to know other than financial sustainability, what has been the development impact of ADB's private sector operations. So just a brief snapshot of the country-wise issues and opportunities of the 4 countries that are under discussion here. So Afghanistan, of course, is a very priority country for us. It's what's called Fragile and Conflict-Affected Situation, FCAS in the ADB parlance. We made a very strong re-entry in the private sector side in Afghanistan in 2019 after 13 years. We had done a couple of telecom transactions in 2006-07 around that time, but we supported the very first solar project and the very first gas-based power projects private sector in 2019 and 20. There is very strong management and board support, and we do have a fairly robust kind of a pipeline in Afghanistan right now. Uzbekistan, of course, is the seat of action in the region right now, and we see a lot of private sector potential. We have been very aggressively pursuing renewable transactions. We supported the very first solar project last year. We are working very closely with Takeo's team and with our public sector colleagues to see how we can come in with more support to the private sector. Kyrgyz Republic and Tajikistan, unfortunately, we are not seeing a lot of traction on the private sector side. Very weak institutions set up. We don't see a very robust PPP regime emerging yet, which could attract the private sector. And we do believe a lot of work is needed in those 2 countries before we can really build a credible pipeline and try to do something more meaningful in those regions. So these are some of the projects that we did in the last 5-6 years in these 4 countries. So Uzbekistan, we have done, as I mentioned, some oil and gas projects, and we did the Navoy solar project last year, a 100 megawatt solar transaction. Afghanistan, I mentioned that we did a 15 megawatt solar project last year. We did the 58 megawatt Mazar gas-fired project. So these are landmark transactions in the context of Afghanistan, where there has been absolutely no private sector investment for a long period of time. In Uzbekistan, as I said, we are very active, and the outlook also remains very strong. We're right now looking at least 4 transactions, which hopefully will make significant progress in 2021. And Afghanistan also, we have a pipeline of a solar and a wind project. So overall, we are seeing a lot of traction in the renewable space in the 4 countries. At least in 2 of the 4 countries under consideration here. So just again, very briefly, I'll just touch upon 3 of our recent transactions. The Navoy transaction, it's a 100 megawatt solar deal that we did last year. It's an IFC advised transaction. We provided $9.5 million of our own money, and we also mobilized $8 million from one of our donors as concessional financing. It's the first independent power project in Uzbekistan. We work very closely with IFC, the World Bank Group, and EBRD on this transaction. And basically, our valuation was to provide long-term financing, which is not available. And then we do expect the Navoy documentation to become a template for future investments in the sector for the days to come. Afghanistan, the Mazar gas-fired project, this took a long period of time, at least 6-7 years. It's a 58 odd megawatt gas-based project of immense importance to the country. We provided a $20 million loan, 10 million from our own balance sheet and 10 million from JICA, which is provided with a pot of funds to manage. So it's again going to be of immense benefit to the country. It's going to save a lot of resources in terms of foreign exchange savings, and it's really a landmark transaction. And I can talk about that later if there's anything on Q&A. And lastly, I just wanted to touch upon the Kandahar solar power project, which is a 15.1 megawatt solar deal in Afghanistan, which we supported in April 2019. We supported a Turkish sponsor called 77CT. And here again, we kind of were able to mobilize donor funding to make the project bankable. We provided $4 million from our own resources and almost $3.85 million from the Canadian Climate Fund for the private sector in Asia. So these are some of the examples of recent projects in the region where we are trying our best to expand our footprint and do more to support the region. I'll stop there for now and happy to answer any questions at a later stage.
Okay, thank you very much, Shantanu, for that excellent overview. And as I keep saying, remind people, if you've got questions on any of the presentations, on anything to crop up, please post it in the Q&A and we'll deal with them later. I also want to remind you that all of the presentations will be available afterwards. They will be emailed to all of those who've registered for this event, and the video recording will also be available. I know there's a couple of people who are having some connections problems, so we will post out the video as well as the presentations later. So moving quickly along, our next presenter is Matthew Jordan Tank. Matthew is the Director of Sustainable Infrastructure Policy and Project Preparation at EBRD, and covering the energy, transport and municipal sectors. And again, the details of his bio are in the documentation you will have received. So Matthew, let me pass the floor to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. And let me thank the American Uzbek Chamber of Commerce for inviting me and EBRD to participate in this great event. If I can ask the organizers to pull up my slides, please. And I can speak to them. Okay, great. So I am indeed responsible at the bank for project preparation and policy work. If we can move right into the slides, I'll give you an overview of that and try to give you as much information as possible in a short amount of time. So EBRD endeavors to provide really a holistic support system for our government clients, which is where we're focusing from my team's vantage point on working really in the upstream area with policy and planning activities, really the kinds of preparation that the government needs to position itself to bring forward programmatic investment, at scale in these sectors. We then get into the whole area of project preparation, procurement, really what is PPP advisory. That ranges all the way from pre-feasibility, feasibility, right all the way through to procurement of the tenders and following through to the award, commercial and financial close. At that point, there is a kind of Chinese wall which separates the upstream work that is in my team for policy and project preparation to the EBRD financing team, and indeed other financiers, private sector financiers who come in on a mobilized basis through the financing with construction and operation. Over to the next slide, please. Right, so this is, next one, please. The policy unit essentially does, as I said, the planning and capacity building really for government clients so that they can understand, international best practice. We do help them with establishing methodologies for value for money and life cycle cost analysis so they know which types of projects really are amenable to PPP solutions and private sector involvement. we do a lot of work in actually creating the enabling environment, the legal and institutional environments that are needed before a country really can be successful at PPPs or in the energy sector with renewables. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we went the wrong way. Yeah, we went forward a couple. Yes, one more. There we go. Okay, so this is the PPP Advisory Unit in my team. So what we're really doing here is working for governments on a mandated basis to help them work through, in this case, this focuses on PPP in the transport and municipal area. So we are working for governments. So we're an objective arm's length support system for them. We mobilize consultants upfront, and we supervise them to task in terms of being on time and on budget, working for the governments to deliver their investable, bankable transactions. So we have 14 of these PPP mandates, and you can see they range from the LRT in Almaty in Kazakhstan, the Almaty Hospital PPP. I'm picking out the ones in the region. We have the Tashkent Samarkand toll road, which is in Uzbekistan. And you can see here, there's a lot of transport projects. There are ports, airports. There are some school PPPs that we're doing in other places, road PPPs, as I said, logistics. So it's quite a geographic spread. And I'm really proud to say that after having founded this in 2016 and really getting going in 2017, we now have awarded the two Ukrainian ports and the Sofia airport transactions. They've gone all the way through to commercial and financial close. We work together with IFC on those. We partner quite closely, and that's really in the spirit of working the IFIs and the MDBs as a system here. So next slide, please. Okay, so the advisory, this is just you can look at the detail later, but we run, as I said, all the way from technical studies, the legal due diligence, financial market signing, all the way through to the tender and commercial and financial close. So it is indeed the full spectrum. So it's just some more detail on that. Next slide, please. And this is our team. We have a small team indeed, because we are pre-funding private sector advisory firms, so legal, technical, and financial advisory firms, who we then supervise, as I said. So we established a 40 million euro internal project preparation facility fund from our net reserves, and we're deploying those resources across all of these different PPP mandates. So this is the small team that we have. Ivan Novikov, he will, hopefully you can get to know him if you're interested in our projects. He's based in Almaty, and he's one of the key team members in the region for Central Asia. Next slide, please. Okay, I thought it was helpful to put this out there. Essentially, we have on the left, the advisory unit of EBRD. We enter in this mandate, a formal contribution agreement with the government as the promoter. And then we run through the process to get them to the point of a private sponsor concessionaire winning the bid. I just wanted to show you that we do this on a reimbursable basis, so that in fact, the money that we've pre-funded, and they average something like 1.5 million euros per transaction, it recycles and is reimbursed back to the EBRD's advisory unit. And we do this, and that is paid for by the winning private sector sponsor as part of the overall project cost. We do this so that there's financial sustainability on the one hand, but also a business and commercial orientation to this, because PPPs are commercial, they are business transactions, and we think that's very wholly in the spirit of doing this, and if they're large enough, they can be acceptable to the private sector, as we found. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the other side of the coin. I talked about infrastructure. We also have a very active program of renewable energy auctions. We have 20 different auctions now across some 15 countries of operation. In Uzbekistan, we have a very large, ambitious program that the government has asked us to do, which is 1 gigawatt of wind power auctions. So the first of these is coming through in the next month. for 100 million megawatts. That will be followed by the second lot, and we'll work through that for a full 1 gigawatt of wind. And we're doing this, my colleague from ADB mentioned the solar sector. There's about one gigawatt at least, or probably more perhaps, that they are handling and doing with IFC. And so, you know, it's a real joint effort of the IFIs in Uzbekistan, and rightly so, because it's a really interesting and excellent market, and we're very excited about it, and we'll continue to support it throughout the next years. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I won't go into all the detail, but I did want to show you the Tashkent-Samarkand Road. This is a very, very important, large project, well north of $1 billion in investment value. We have the full feasibility study now coming through. This will lead all the way through to a tender process where we expect to get quite good competition among the industry for road PPPs. This is one of our biggest assignments. It's 3 million euros that we're putting into this, and it needs it because it is a large, complex project that will be the first of its kind in Uzbekistan in the road sector, or one of the first. There's another effort being done by the World Bank, and we think this is very important to bring in very high quality, safe, reliable roads into Uzbekistan. Okay, good. I think I'll stop there in the interest of time. There are other case studies which I'd be happy to step through for you, for the audience, and you can contact me or my two colleagues who, as associate directors, Marcos Martinez, who leads the PPP unit, and John C., who leads our policy unit, so in my team. So thank you very much, and happy to participate. Thank you.
Chris, your microphone.
Sorry, rattling away there to myself. Sorry. So, Matthew, thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. And to remind everybody that if you've got questions on this presentation or indeed any other presentation, please do post them in the Q&A, and we will get to them to endeavor to answer all questions before we finish the session. So let me move on now to our next speaker. Ryder Rogers is the director of USAID Central Asia's Economic Development Office based in Almaty, and he oversees USAID's regional portfolio for trade, energy, and environmental resources management. And again, you can see his full bio in the documentation that has been sent to you. So Ryder, let me pass to you for the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. If we could pull up my presentation, please. And before I get started, I just want to say a big thank you to Elena and AUCC for having us here today for this presentation and the opportunity to talk about USAID's portfolio. Okay, there's the presentation. So first of all, I am planning to give a quick overview of USAID's economic development efforts in the region. But I also hope that this discussion will spur further discussion and thoughts, where I'm happy to follow up with anyone on any ideas that folks have for further engagement. At USAID, we don't have the deep pockets, if you will, of some of my fellow panelists' organizations. We aren't providing financing, but at the same time, we're working very closely on technical engagement, providing technical assistance throughout the region in our various sectors. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are not aware, USAID is the US government's premier international development agency. And we're working to promote a free, peaceful, and prosperous world in around 100 countries around the globe. Here in Central Asia, we work both regionally as well as bilaterally through USAID missions and country offices that are really focused on individual country issues. But on the regional level, we're really focused around three key sectors. First of all, economic development, which I represent. We also work in health and education, as well as democracy and governance. And so if there are any questions or interest in those sectors, I'll be happy to connect folks with my colleagues. Next slide, please. So our regional economic development efforts, we're working to strengthen connectivity, not only between countries in Central Asia, but also building ties with South Asia, in particular Afghanistan. Many of you may have heard of the C5+1 diplomatic platform. But for those of you who haven't, this is a platform for engagement at all levels of government between the 5 Central Asian countries and the United States. And in economic development, we work throughout our portfolio, engaging mostly at the technical and expert level to bring together stakeholders in support of C5+1. We work in 3 key sectors for economic growth. First of all, trade and enterprise development. Secondly, environment, and by that I include water resources as well as climate change. And finally, energy. Next slide, please. So under trade and enterprise development, we're really working to create a improved enabling environment for both business and investment. And this is for local firms as well as for US and other international firms. One way we do this is support for the World Trade Organization, both for accession and for compliance with WTO standards. I'm really proud of the role that Usaid has played in helping Uzbekistan's WTO accession efforts. We were the first donor to come to the table to offer support to Uzbekistan after President Mirziyoyev announced the interest in Uzbekistan restarting its WTO efforts. We're continuing to provide support in that regard. And working really closely with many other donors who are now also providing assistance. We also do a number of business connectivity events, hoping to bring businesses together to form connections throughout Central Asia. One of our flagship events is our Central Asia Trade Forum. And many of the companies who are participating today, I think have joined us in the past for our trade forum. But this is a good opportunity not only for businesses, but also for governments. We get government leaders from around the region, also a lot of thought leaders to come together and to discuss a lot of the issues affecting trade in the region. This last year we did a virtual forum, and we may have to again this year, but I hope that all of you will join us for that. One other thing we support is connectivity with Afghanistan, both through business networking and also several things on the ground. For example, we're working with Uzbekistan to support their planned free economic zone in Termez. This is something that we think would really help to spur trade between Afghanistan and Greater Central Asia. And I don't have time to show it now, but I put a link in the slides for our Trade for Tomorrow video. And this is just a great example. This gentleman on the left side of this photo, Usaid worked with him in starting his cold storage business to help him with identifying exports abroad. So anyway, I hope folks will watch that if they have the time. Next slide, please. So our trade efforts are really focused around a few key sectors. First of all, horticulture. This is something we've worked on in almost every country in the region. On the regional level, we're helping exporters to identify new markets. Traditionally, they've been reliant mostly on the Russian market, but we've done trade missions to the Baltics. We've trade missions to the Middle East as well. And also helped producers to address sanitary and phytosanitary concerns. In the transport and logistics sector, we've helped to bring companies together to have a common voice and raise some of their concerns to governments in the region. So working to reduce time and cost of moving goods across the region. In tourism, this is an area where we're really hoping to encourage more multi-country tourism when folks visit the region. The sector has been really impacted by COVID, but we hope we can work with governments to have a common approach. And then information technology, this is a sector that's pretty new for us, but we're working with startups, providing training for them. We also hope to connect them with US companies so that they can adopt their technologies and learn from best practices. We've also worked with Uzbekistan on their venture capital legislation to help facilitate more investment. And we're looking at other countries we can work with in the region as well on that. And finally, with textiles, this is an area that's relatively new for us, but we're looking to encourage textile exports where appropriate. Uzbekistan is a great example of a country that's taken a lot of steps to reduce some issues in the cotton sector. And as a reward, it will be nice if they are able to connect with new markets for a lot of their products. Next slide, please. So quickly under environment, for many years, we've supported transboundary water resource management. We've worked with countries with small basin councils to come up with water sharing agreements, to come up with plans for how they will share their precious water resources. In the future, we want to support more dialogue amongst governments in the region. One other issue that's definitely emerging as a priority for the Biden administration is climate change. So we're currently looking at how we can enhance our efforts around climate change. We've worked in the past on national adaptation planning. And we're also doing a lot under our energy program for renewables and for energy efficiency, which I'll talk more about next. Next slide, please. So one of our key successes on our energy portfolio has been our support for renewable energy auctions. We work very closely with the government of Kazakhstan in establishing renewable energy auctions since 2017. We've supported them through multiple rounds of auctions. And so we're glad to see that every year more and more renewable energy is coming online. We've also recently worked with Tajikistan to install a solar project in the Pamir region of Tajikistan, a very inaccessible region near the border with Afghanistan. And we're also talking with other countries in the region about what we can do there. By the way, my colleague Patrick Meyer also presented at an AUCC event a few weeks ago and went into much more detail on our energy interventions, much more articulately than I will, but I'm happy to connect you with our energy team if you have more questions. Next slide, please. One other energy intervention that we're doing is our support for Central Asia regional electricity market. This map here is a map of the existing grid in Central Asia. As you can see, there is a lot of infrastructure, but unfortunately, a lot of it is based on 1970s Soviet infrastructure. And from the early 90s, a lot of the countries pursued a energy independent strategy. So they actually cut lines, went about it in their own way. And so what Usaid is working towards is trying to help countries to reconnect, have transparent energy sharing, and also work towards least cost production. So this will also contribute toward some energy efficiency goals. Next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to mention the CASA 1000 project. Many of my fellow panelists organizations are supporting CASA 1000. This is a $1.2 billion project to supply hydropower from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, transiting through Afghanistan and to Pakistan. So USAID's role in this is that we support the secretariat for CASA. which is helping to coordinate a lot of the various actors to help keep the project moving forward. And in spite of many challenges around COVID, I've been happy to see a lot of progress that's been made even over the past year. So next slide, please. And that's it for my presentation, but I just want to thank everyone for their attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryder. And again, a reminder, just please do post your questions, and we'll get through as many or hopefully all of them before we finish. So let's move on to then our fifth and final speaker today, Anand Kumar Srivastava. He is the coordinator for regional integration projects and senior government specialist for procurement in the African regions of the World Bank Group. He is a global strategic procurement and program management expert. So Anand, let me please pass the floor to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you, the organizers, for inviting me for this session. And I'm here talking about a report which could be helpful for the participants when they are taking a flight to Central Asia and trying to see on a broad level what are the countries and they could prefer to make investment. So this is part of the series of report which World Bank has done over the last 6 years on benchmarking the infrastructure development. And the report I'm going to present before you is a very high-level summary of benchmarking infrastructure development 2020, or BID 2020. I am working with Africa regional integration projects at the moment, and the project portfolio is about $15 billion with about 90 projects, and I coordinate procurement with 65 of procurement specialists spread all over Africa, East and West. So getting into this study, in 2020, we had covered 140 economies of the world, which for public-private partnership study on 4 criteria, and I'll come to that later. But we also had a pilot for 40 economies for traditional procurement of infrastructure. So all those which are in red or dark red here are the PPP and TPI, both the traditional procurement and public procurement, the public-private partnership procurements. And the blue ones are only PPP procurement. The thematic coverage of BID 2020, or Benchmarking Infrastructure Development 2020, was on 4 areas: preparation, procurement, contract management, and also unsolicited proposals, because they also are being practiced, not so much in practice as such. And we looked at the regulatory framework and institutional arrangement. This study is a result of the questionnaires which were shared with thousands of key stakeholders, including private sector lawyers and government and developers who are working in these countries, and the contractors. So I would like to present the key findings on procurement of PPPs. And if you look at this particular slide, which is a quite dense slide because it is talking about the study which covers 140 countries, but I would like to focus on one aspect, which is how many, what percentage of countries have adopted the reforms for making more than one procurement methods available for public-private partnership. So we find that for 14%, they have gone through the reforms. So that is kind of adopting new methods. But overall, 66% of the economies surveyed have adopted to new or more procurement methods than one. Similarly, when we look at the other criteria, which is how many countries are giving more than 60 days for submission of and preparation of bids, then we find 9% have increased that number, but overall only 18% countries have provided bid preparation time of 60 days. So I think this is an area of improvement still, but let's go to the other slide. Here you will see that the low-income group has the largest gap between legal and practice scores, indicating they face major challenges in implementing regulatory reforms. So average PPP procurement legal score is 63 for global, and for PPP procurement practice score. So we had done this exercise for both the legal system as it is and how it is practiced. So the practice score for the global average is 59 as against the legal score as framework of 63. So there's a gap between what is as per statute and how it is being practiced. But we can also see the score for Europe and Central Asia region, which excludes Afghanistan for the World Bank. And we find that average PPP procurement legal score is 68, whereas the PPP average practice score is 62. So there is larger gap as compared to the global average, but it is doing better than the global average on both the legal score as well as practice score. Now I'll deep dive into the trends in Central Asia and Afghanistan. For World Bank, Afghanistan is part of South Asia, not Central Asia, but I have personally worked in Afghanistan for about 3 years. And when colleagues in the panelists from Usaid was talking about CASA 1000, that was a project where I had personally involved as a senior procurement specialist some 4 years ago. And now coming to the details on regulatory quality, and I will again expand this because it's a very dense slide. So ECA region, you can see, is having a score of 50 for preparation of public-private partnerships, and on PPP procurement, it has a score of 68. So on procurement, it's doing much better than many other regions. And PPP contract management score is 65, and evaluation and management of unsolicited proposals 55. A quick overview of other regions also is here, and I encourage you to go through the report, for which the link is provided subsequently, for getting full detail of each of the 140 economies. So this is on the regulatory quality of developing public-private partnership in ECA, which is higher than the most other region except for OECD, high income category countries. And the regulation for public-private partnerships are, however, still far from fully following internationally recognized good practice in case of ECA. Now, this is talking about the regulatory quality of public-private partnerships. And here we have tried to compare for today's presentation how the EU economies, which are part of the ECA region for us, are doing. So they are doing much better, but at the same time, at the lower end is Caucasus. And Caucasus, as you can see, is not doing as well as other economies in ECA region which are part of the EU membership. So there's a wide sub-regional variation among ECA economies regarding the regulatory quality of PPPs. ECA economies belonging to EU are better prepared, while there's ample room of improvement for PPP regulatory qualities in Caucasus. This slide talks about the regulatory quality of PPP preparation. And here we are deep diving into the countries, specific countries in ECA region. So there's a very good example in some economies, and it contrasts with extremely weak regulations in others. So we see here that Tajikistan is doing very well on this parameter. And Kazakhstan is the next one, Kyrgyz Republic followed by that. And they are doing much better than the global average. And Afghanistan is falling short, although they have recently started, and I was also involved with first public-private partnership project, which is funded by the World Bank there, and we helped them to develop public investment management tool for screening of the projects which were to go forward for implementation and investment. And Uzbekistan is at the lowest on this count. So I go to the next one on the regulatory quality of public-private partnership procurements. And here again, we are getting into detail by country-wise. And on the left side, you will find the bars which are representing various regions, comparing them with OECD economies, high-income economies. And on the right side, you'll find in the green color are again five countries in ECA on procurement procedures in place. And the general idea is that they're influenced by membership. Again, those which are in members of European Union, they are doing well. But coming to, again, the countries which are part of Central Asia, Kazakhstan is doing almost equal to the average globally. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Kyrgyz Republic are in the descending order, as you can see on this graph. And and the last slide, the last but one slide here is on the regulatory quality of PPP contracts management. So most of the ECA countries are above global average. That means the law and regulations devote enough attention to this area there. And difference among economy remains, showing a lot of opportunities to improve. And again, I will focus on those economies which are part of Central Asia here. And Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan in reducing order. Now, I'll go to the last slide, which may be of interest to the industry who would like to bid for opportunities in World Bank. And World Bank annual financing of projects is in the range of $80 billion US. You can find the details of the business opportunity on the guidance on finding business opportunity at the link provided here. And you can also look at the video of our Chief Procurement Policy Officer who talks about the opportunity in World Bank finance projects. And the first link is on the report detail. And I will just...
Hello, my name is Enzo Laurentiis, and I'm the Chief Procurement Officer at the World Bank.
So
I would like to talk to you about opportunities to bid for contracts on the projects that World Bank finances around the world.
Okay, and then that video is playing, yeah?
Yeah,
but we can't see it.
Successful bid. Let me share
Yes,
4
so,
reasons why you may want to consider bidding for
what
World
our
Bank finance procurement
Chief
projects.
Procurement Officer is
First,
presenting, but
the World Bank
I
has a
leave it for you
huge and diverse portfolio of projects.
to look at later in
First,
the
standard
detail.
investment projects
And
in
I come
132
back to
countries
the
around the
last
globe.
screen, which I was
At any point
sharing.
in time,
The bank finances
And you
procurement
can
worth about
always
80
refer
billion
to
in US
all
dollars.
other reports. I'm here to answer
Our annual operational
questions.
procurement is between 14
Thank you.
and 20.
Thank you. And please,
finance, government-led
the
projects.
video is still playing in the background, by the way. The link, is it gone now? Okay, good. So thank you very much for that excellent presentation. That completes the presentations. And to remind everybody that all of today's presentations will be sent to those who registered for the event, and a copy of the video of the proceedings will also be available for anybody who would like to get a copy. We are technically over time, but there's still almost 100 people online. We have a number of questions, so we will move on to those questions. The first one I'm going to direct to ADB, Takeo or Shantanu, whichever of you. The question relates to more data sourcing. The specific question is refers to the work that was done in Tajikistan with ADB in 2016. Which was an extensive exercise gathering information about public-private partnership and led to some changes. And then the question that derives from that comment about the work is, from what source did you obtain information, or do you, I guess, obtain information on public-private partnerships? So just generally asking the question, where is this information available? How do you bring it all together to get a full picture? And can I also just add to that my own addition, which is to ask you about coordination. We've presentations today from EBRD, from USAID, World Bank, and ADB. How do you coordinate on PPPs? I'm assuming it's not a case that you're out there looking to see who can grab the best PPPs to manage them. Is there a coordination process as well as kind of data sharing and data information? How do the organizations work together in order to create the kind of full picture? So Takeo or Shantanu, could I ask you maybe to pick up on those, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you for this question. I was kind of wondering when I was looking at this question, I mean, I couldn't really get the actually question itself, but I mean, typically, you know, we just go directly to the government and then also, you know, relevant agencies to gather those data. And then particularly we have, you know, resident office, I mean, local office in each of those countries. And then we have day-to-day communication. And then I don't think we have done anything in Tajikistan yet, but in some of the other countries, we are recently preparing a kind of database called PPP Monitor, which summarizes key kind of, you know, PPP environmental issues, and then basically share information with the government as well as also investors. So when we try to compile those kind of database about PPP in some of those countries, in addition to those, you know, day-to-day engagement and then also data gathering from the government, we also work with experts and then also consultants who can also collect data from different sources, including public domain as well as also some other agencies. That's a kind of general approach that we have. And then in relation to coordination, actually Matthew is one of those, you know, people in other MDBs who are in constant touch with us, exchange information from strategic level discussion down to transaction level kind of, you know, discussions. And then this you know, coordination and then also communication across those MDBs amongst the PPP experts is a very frequent. We often, you know, see each other and then also happen to meet, in an event like this, and then also some other engagements. So we continue doing this at the various level, and then at the institutional level, we also have very regular coordination meeting amongst the MDBs, and then also bilateral donors at the local office level, as well as also HQ level. And then when we try to just come up with a country strategy, it's a kind of overall strategy for lending and then lending operations. But we always have a coordination meeting with the donors to make sure that our approach is somehow aligned, or at least wouldn't create any conflict or redundancy, and then to be more efficient. On this point, I'm not sure whether Matthew, you could probably add anything which you may think of. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Takeo. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, indeed. I mean, we have on one level, we have at the sort of project preparation and policy level, we have a what we call the MDB cooperation platform. EBRD had the privilege to coordinate that, chair that for the last 2 years, and now it's a rotating chair, and it's now with EIB. So all of the major MDBs, all 10 of us now with the new Asian-based MDBs, AIB, NDB, we're all part of this, and we meet regularly, at least once a month, to discuss issues of coordination, indeed, policy exchange, best practice, lessons learned, etc. I think also at the project preparation facility level, there is a lot of interaction between all of us who have set these up over the last years, as I mentioned. And a place like Uzbekistan actually is a good example. Thinking about the renewable energy sector, there was a real upfront discussion about who would do wind, who would do solar, who would come in on the downstream financing, who prepares the upstream work. So it runs right through the upstream policy, through the project preparation, through to the financing. So I think that's a great example, actually. And we just have to, communication's the key. And I think as long as everyone is thinking of the bigger picture, which is about mobilizing in as much private sector investment as possible, things will work out. And I would say the other thing that's important, let me make one last statement. The countries themselves, it's incumbent upon them as well to help make this coordination and these discussions happen. Ultimately, the countries know what they want from the wider MDB system, and to the extent that they can direct the direction of travel, direct the way we all work, that's all to the good. So I think Uzbekistan has a very active PPP unit, very good people in the government, and that's one of the reasons why there's so much activity there. The government really is very active in organizing the work. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Matthew. Actually, and that does answer another question that was going to come up anyway about the sourcing of projects and who drives it. But I think you've just explained that absolutely very clearly in relation to Uzbekistan and the region. But actually, the next question is also directed specifically to you. The comment is that for the last several years, the involvement of the private sector in the provision of public infrastructure and services through the use of PPPs is being promoted as a global, quote, silver bullet for virtually all development problems. And the comment is, however, there is plenty of evidence that private finance initiatives do not automatically lead to successful infrastructure projects. The question then is, in this context and in your experience, what do you think are the critical factors for success of PPPs in Central Asia?
Okay, I don't think actually Central Asia is that much different than any other given region in the world. The ingredients for success are proper preparation, and I mean in terms of understanding on the government side of what they really should be selecting for private sector involvement. So that project filtering, that project prioritization, the assessment of what should come through as a tender with the private sector, and conversely, what doesn't really work. I think that's really important. And there's a lot of capacity building that needs to happen. And that's one of the roles of the MDBs. I think another thing is certainly the enabling environment. I mean, if there are too many gaps in the legal framework for PPPs, it will be an uphill struggle from the very beginning, and you will be having to do sort of ad hoc, sort of presidential executive orders or presidential decrees, left, right, and center to make something work. And that you can do it, but it takes a lot more time, and as opposed to just having a really solid, proper legal framework for doing these kind of transactions. I think the other thing is political will. When the going gets tough, that's where the successful projects that ultimately come through, it's because the tough political decisions are made by government and they stick through it. And that's not just during the tendering phase and the structuring, but also in the implementation. Most PPPs are structured with what's called availability payments, ongoing payments over many, many, many years. And that takes, a commitment and continuity from one government to the next government and beyond. If they're lasting 20, 25 years, the PPP contract, you need real political commitment to stay with it. So I think those, for me, I mean, just very quickly, those are the kinds of ingredients of success. And when you don't have those, there are many, many failures out there. And I think, it's broad brush, and obviously it's a conversation you could have for go into a lot of detail on examples. But I think that, to me, is what distinguishes successful from unsuccessful projects.
Okay, Matthew, thank you very much. That's very clear. Ryder, if I can direct the next question to you, and it's just dropped off. The comments that's come in that says the region has major tourism potential, and I think it's been referred to by a number of speakers already today, but the potential both to create sustainable FX inflow and also quality jobs. To help the growth of the sector, financing is needed for hotel, resort, and vocational schools to train tourism professionals. The question is, how can IFIs help with this? I know it's an area you touched on in your presentation, but just answering in relation to this particular question. I'd be interested.
Sure.
Yeah, here's thoughts.
Thanks for the question, Chris. Regarding finance specifically, I would probably direct that more to my colleagues on the line, because the IFIs are the ones doing a lot more of the finance for the hotels, but more importantly for a lot of the infrastructure to get people to the different parts of Central Asia. And I know there's been a lot of work done in that regard. Usaid is not working in those areas, but we are providing a lot of the soft skills, a lot of the training for professionals in the tourism industry. We did a very interesting training about a year and a half ago, working with local hotel operators on booking.com. How do you market your hotel? How do you show what you're offering and really put your best foot forward? So that folks aren't having to go to some local website. They go to the website they know and trust to book make their bookings. A lot of trainings we provide capacity building for different destination management organizations. So working with communities to refine their product. We worked with Tashkent in Tajikistan to help them attract tourists. When people go to Samarkand in Uzbekistan, everyone knows Samarkand, everyone goes there, but it's a very easy day trip over into Tajikistan. You can tack that on. So we're working with them to refine their product and make sure folks know about it. But regarding infrastructure or financing, I'd leave that to some of my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Ryder. The next question, I think maybe Shantanu, if you could take it. The question is about energy. Specifically, they ask about energy and solar projects and whether there are efforts in the region to introduce or increase the use of concentrated solar power. This seems a very specific question into the energy mix. And I guess you were talking about the solar projects in the Navoy region. Is this something that you can address? concentrated solar power in the energy mix?
I mean, I can address that. Yes, so absolutely. I mean, we're open to any kind of supporting any form of technology. I mean, we have historically supported one project in India right now, which uses the CSP technology, but it's frankly, to our knowledge, it's not really fully developed yet. So basically, most of our interventions have really been on the traditional solar PV technology. But yes, subject to satisfactory technical feasibility and the cost element as well. I mean, our understanding is that CSP is definitely much more expensive at this current stage of time compared to PV. So, but yes, I mean, subject to a robust technical feasibility, there is no reason why we should not, on a case-by-case basis, be supporting other technologies that are suitable for the grid as well. So,
Right. Thank you very much, Shantanu. Okay, moving on. The next question is more specific about Afghanistan. And there are actually two related questions here. This first one, from your view, how can countries from Central Asia collaborate with Afghanistan on PPP projects? Maybe he suggested maybe some ideas regarding cross-border projects with the creation of integrated infrastructure in Afghan border and neighboring countries. And I guess we've had some of that anyway with the slides looking at the power transition systems, the CASA 1000 and other projects, I guess, do address that. But before I pass the question to panelists, the second question related, it is, what is the mission of ADB, USAID, World Bank, EBRD for infrastructure PPP support if peace negotiations will be successful, and what will be their mission if peace will not? So I guess just to tidy up that question, the question is what is the appetite for PPPs in Afghanistan at this stage? We can certainly see the cross-border and the energy, electricity side, I guess, which was clearly explained. But what is the appetite? Is it a case that that you're waiting to see what happens in Afghanistan, waiting to see if peace will kind of be maintained, or is there an appetite to go into Afghanistan with PPPs right now? I'm not really sure.
I
can be willing to take this.
I can start if that's okay, Chris.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so on the first question, absolutely. I mean, from ADB's perspective, one of our strategic agenda is, of course, to support regional cooperation. So, CASA 1000 was mentioned earlier, and we're also doing a significant pipeline project, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, TAPI project. That's been going on for a long time. So I guess I will just stop at saying two things. One is that, for the private sector to really get involved in these types of initiatives, there needs to be absolutely strong and watertight, government commitments across the region. These are all very strong G2G projects, and unless there's a strong commitment and a seamless commitment from all the governments, these things don't move. And we have seen that with all these multi-billion-dollar initiatives in the region, they really haven't moved to a stage where they are suitable for private sector investment. Number one. And number two is, of course, a bankability issue. I mean, the contractual, the robustness of the contractual structure doesn't really differ in any form or manner when it's a cross-border investment as opposed to a domestic investment. So, I mean, again, who's the off-taker that we're talking about? Is it DABS in Afghanistan? DABS is bankrupt. I mean, we know that DABS is not creditworthy, and there will be a significant requirement to shore up DABS's creditworthiness as an off-taker. So that item doesn't change whether it's a cross-border project selling power into Afghanistan, or whether it's a domestic project which sells power to Afghanistan. So those are some of the generic issues that need to be addressed, fundamental issues that need to be addressed to kind of foster a spirit of kind of bankability in these regional types of projects. But we are all for supporting these. ADB has done a lot of such cross-border projects, may not be in Central Asia, but we have success stories of hydropower projects exporting from Laos to Thailand and so on and so forth. So it is in the strategic agenda. We do understand the value and the potential of regional cooperation. So this is clearly a thing. But eventually, the governments can do it. But to be able to really attract credible private sector investment, it all boils down to bankability at the end of the day. And frankly, there's a long way to go in the region, before, dollops of private sector can come in to support those types of initiatives. And in terms of the second question, I mean, peace, no, I mean, we're open for business. Quite frankly, as I mentioned, we have in Afghanistan. I mean, we have a very focused approach towards what we call fragile and conflict, affected in a situation. FCAS countries, and Afghanistan is obviously the most important of that, I think. So we have done in 2019, we did the solar project in Kandahar. 2020, we've done Mazar. We are selective. We try to mitigate any political risk arising out of violence and those types of political events as much as possible by finding mitigants. I mean, the security situation is very closely coordinated during the project implementation stage. And, we are, in fact, we are looking at some projects which are right now, right at the heart of, I mean, areas that are controlled by the Taliban and things like that. So clearly we are open for business. We take a risk-based approach towards looking at those projects, but I mean, the sponsors are there. We do have a set of domestically entrenched sponsors in Afghanistan who are very keen to further these projects. So as long as the equity is there, I don't think the multilaterals can shy away citing political violence, because it is in our mandate to really support projects in those conflict affected areas. Of course, I mean, we also, as I said, we get support from donors, and we cannot support very large projects clearly, sure. but we're definitely open for business.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. I think that's I think there's a lot, we hear that a lot in our business, these sort of questions that people ask very basically. They have a view of the region, and so it's good to hear that you are open for in this areas. Anybody else would like to add something?
Yes, I come in because I was based in Afghanistan for 3 years, so I can also relate to the real stories there. So World Bank has been engaged with Afghanistan since 2002 in the recent period. And we have worked on various things, including the reforms. So on public-private partnership specifically, I worked on CASA 1000 project, and that's not a PPP project, but an energy project. And we made the bidding process successful there, reducing the cost from $800 million to 343 for HVDS converter station. On PPPs, bank has engaged with the government of Afghanistan. When I say bank, I mean World Bank. On their bringing the legislation and also the regulation. And World Bank has funded a project through Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund money, using that money, equivalent to $35 million. The objective of that project is, it's called as first PPP project. The objective is to develop the systems where the viability of the project can be done using the scientific way of doing it. And what we use there is public investment management system, which is identifying the projects which are PPAble, which are not. In terms of readiness of the country to do long-term PPP, I think I would agree with Shantanu that the time hasn't yet come, but yes, there could be a possibility of doing operation maintenance contracts, the contracts like which can be monitored from distance, such as the CASA 1000 HVDC itself, where they are using a SCADA system to monitor the HVDS converter station. So I think the readiness of the country is not there in terms of doing full-fledged BOT at the moment at a large scale, but yes, country is ready to do the lower range of the projects where operation maintenance can be done by the private sector by bringing the efficiency, and also service contracts and things like that. But this first PPP project is a good opportunity to expand this bandwidth of use of public-private partnership and stuff here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Anand. It's very clear. Can I ask one general question that I wanted to ask? In so say developed world or in other parts of the world, ESG has become such a big theme, and I know all of our presenters today did touch on aspects on renewable areas on the environment. But in terms of kind of packaging and looking at the ESG theme, environment, social, and governance, and we know there's a significant amount of private sector money that is now looking for investments around the world, provided that these projects comply with the high standards of ESG. The question I'm asking is this something that's also now becoming an issue for IFIs or for the private sector? The co-investors in PPP projects, are they asking about ESG, or is that really not on the radar as a theme, but more just individually on different aspects? So I don't know if perhaps Matthew, if I can default to you
Sure.
and ask you what you guys are
Yeah.
seeing on this area.
Thank you, Chris. Well, indeed, I mean, in some respects, and I'm not trying to be glib here, but you know, EBRD was really established 30 years ago to precisely bring in governance, bring in social and environmental considerations. So we've been doing ESG, you know, kind of compliant projects for really since inception. But to be more to the point today, yeah, we're definitely seeing this burgeoning of demand for ESG projects. We know there's just it's really come into its own in the last few years, particularly I think because you know you have this real consensus now around the SDGs. You have now a even stronger commitment, I think, with the new administration in the U.S. Around the Paris Agreement. And I think this is, at least I can speak for EBRD, I think this is going to have a real effect regarding with regard to Paris. I mean, there are a lot of discussions right now with you know, internally and among all of the banking teams on how to really assess each and every project through that prism of Paris alignment. Whilst it hasn't been officially approved yet, I can tell you that we are actively participating in an MDB-wide discussion on Paris alignment methodologies. We're going to adopt something internally in EBRD, and this is all in the same vein of ESG compliant investments. So it's all really pushing in the right direction. I mean, I'm thrilled to see that because indeed, you know, I work within sustainable infrastructure, and really the vast majority of everything we do is green. It's inclusive, it's social, it's going to be digital as well. Those are all the major drivers, and I think it is really focusing the mind and doing more and more. And the last thing I would say is 50%, a minimum of 50% of all of our projects have to be green economy, green investments now, and that's a high bar, you know, as a big financial institution. And so we're definitely, you know, all I think pushing in the same direction.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to contribute anything to
Yes,
that
if
question?
I can add, environmental safeguard and governance is part of World Bank appraisal process for many decades. And we have also been talking to G20 for implementation of quality infrastructure investment principles, 6 principles, which are focusing on ESG as core or the heart of the project investments. And in World Bank, we also have sustainable procurement guidance, which came out in 2016. And we are having several projects which are focusing on including even sustainability as one of the important criteria for public procurement in the countries where the countries are willing to go sustainability route. So, and our private sector arm, IFC, they have a strong environmental safeguard team, which also looks at environmental safeguard before they give a nod to financing or putting equity in any of the infrastructure projects. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anand. And before I hand back to Elena to wrap up, there is one final question, which I'll direct to ADB, so Takeo or Shantanu. The question is, taking into account that PPP is still a new activity in Uzbekistan, can you describe what kind of issues are you facing typically in the development of PPP projects in Uzbekistan? The question is directed to ADB and EBRD, but Matthew, I think, has already gone through that so very clearly, but as a final comment, Takeo or Shantanu, if you could care to provide a comment on a question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. If I may, then I just answer first. I'm not sure whether Shantanu has anything else, but largely speaking, I can think of three things, and Matthew also touched on it when he was talking about something different. But first of all, project preparation is a key for creating bankable transactions, taking into account market appetite, market views. And then it is a little bit, patient process for the government, because they always try to rush and then deliver things very fast. But this is the area where we try to be, we try to emphasize when we work with any of the government. So far in Uzbekistan, our experience is good, and then the government is trying to do those kind of preparation work in the right way. But I just wanted to highlight it. Just one of those. The second one is a framework. Recently in Uzbekistan, they have actually passed the amendment of the PPP law, which is actually a good thing. And then they actually corrected a number of gaps which they used to have under the PPP law, but now it's taking a good shape. The next step is basically also to work on relevant regulations to make it consistent with this PPP law. So we have to continue working on, let's say, legal reform and then framework reform. That's the second point. Third thing is a local currency financing for the long term, which is not really also unique. Which is not really a unique issue for Uzbekistan, but in general, it is an issue with many of our borrowing member countries. And then we are also trying to work with the government to set up certain kind of vehicle or mechanism through which a local currency financing can be provided for long term to those PPP projects, because it's very scarce and then also very needed when revenues are also denominated in local currency. So perhaps those are the kind of 3 points which I just wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now just coming up to the top of the hour, so just for me to thank the panelists very much, Takeo, Shantanu, Matthew, Ryder, and Anand. Thank you very much for your excellent contributions today. To remind everybody that the presentations will all be available and sent to those who have registered today's event, so you'll be able to follow them in more detail. So thank you very much for your attention. And Elena, I'll pass back to you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Chris and Mark and Danica, Matthew, Takeo, Shantanu, Anand, Ryder, my colleague, Alex Nemchenko, for being here with us and for explaining and presenting to the private sector your vision for the private-public partnerships. And as Takeo just mentioned a few minutes ago, indeed, the kind of like the attitude, I think, and the environment for PPP, even within the Central Asia region, does vary. So I've seen, I think we also a few questions and comments that came from Tajikistan, from Pirumshuk, who is responsible for PPP. And just for your information, we are now working with the governments of Tajikistan and Afghanistan on a separate PPP event. Again, all our events are driven by the private sector. They're driven by American companies such as Medtronic and GE and all the others that would like to know more where the money is coming from and where the money go to, and whether there are particular sectors, be it energies, healthcare, tourism, and etc., would be worth pursuing through the PPP platform. Just for your information, there are 2 more events that are coming up in the pipeline. We are going to have an exciting discussion with US Exim Bank on their program for China and transformational exports and how US companies can compete in Central Asia and globally. We're also going to have a conversation with American investor Dan Patterson of Silverleaf on his engagement in the cotton cluster in Uzbekistan and how the firm is addressing labor issues, adult and forced labor issues, and how they're going to make it more ethical from the sourcing point of view. We're going to have an ILO representative who is going to also acknowledge that Uzbekistan has made significant reforms and changes to to abolish forced labor in the cotton area. Once again, 3 exciting events. Please stay with us, and we will send the recordings like Chris indicated of this event, and we will share the invitations for the upcoming 3 events with you. And once again, if you have any questions, please let us know. We appreciate the speakers and participation. We definitely know that this is not going to be our first and last event. We will be delighted to host you for another group conversation or for an individual conversation with your particular institutions and our audience. Once again, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again. Please stay safe and healthy. And Chris, wonderful moderation. And again, my kind of like my address to the audience and to the panelists. If you ever need a great moderator, Chris is one of them. But most importantly, any insights on the political, economic, or business landscape of Central Asia and beyond, Macro Advisory is the firm to go to. So thank you so much again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next events.
Thank you, Lena. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.